through that. But, I was in New York this past weekend, Stefan. I was down by the Rockefeller Plaza. They've got that big tree. And I see these guys all carrying their AKs and these police. There's a thick police force. And I tweeted this one photo because for me it was so striking. It was this little American girl whose father had to hoist her onto his shoulders so to just, get a glimpse of this Rockefeller tree over top of this thick police line and their tents, etc. And I thought to myself, how sad is this? Because, we used to talk about a war on Christmas being about, capitalism and, consumer interests, etc., over top of this, spiritual high holy day. But the war on Christmas, we literally need guns now. And it's so depressing how bad we've allowed things to get.
Well, and then the guy who just half blew himself up in New York, he said that he did it because there was an offensive number of posters for Christmas in the subway tunnel. And that is a literal explodey vest war on Christmas. And this is the thing that has been so frustrating for me about dealing with atheist faith is that for a lot of people, I think particularly on the left, peace comes from satiety. In other words, when you have indulged all your physical senses, whether it's sex or food or drugs or whatever it's going to be, peace comes from satiety, from satiating your physical needs or requirements. But that, of course, you get hungry again. And so it is an endless hamster wheel of satiation and hunger. The Buddhists talk about that too as well. But what I got from a Christian upbringing, which to me was very powerful, was that peace comes not from the indulging of the senses, but peace comes from the restraint. Peace comes from restraint. I mean, if you look at the 60s versus the 50s were an epoch of sexual restraint, stable families, stable communities, and so on. And you get the 60s where, this Pandora's box of rampant sexuality is opened up and everybody's banging everyone. STDs spread like wildfires, families collapse. And the peace that occurred as the result of self-restraint. Because if you don't restrain yourself, then the government has to chase after you with a net and try and restrain for you, or tax people to pay for the consequences of your bad single mom decisions and so on. But there was this huge switch, and it happened so quickly. And people blame the pill. I don't think it was the pill at all. But this idea that the only peace you're going to get is after you've satisfied your physical wants versus you get peace from disciplining your physical wants. That to me was a big switch. And I held on to that for my Christian upbringing and it served me well. But I have found that a lot of atheists look for peace and satiation rather than self-restraint. And I think it causes society to develop significant cracks.
There are so many factors that have gone into this war, and the war on Christmas, so to speak, is just a symptom of the greater war on Christian and Western civilization. Christianity, of course, being the cradle faith of Western civilization. And look, it's very clear. This 28-year-old bomber, whose name sounds like Allahu Akbar, I don't even remember what it was, a failed bomber at that. What he has done is he has made it very clear he is waging a war on the Christian European majority and way of life. Well, what we've got right now across the West is an invasion, and our invaders are very, very keen on undoing that majority, undoing that way of life. And regrettably, we have their allies instituted in all sorts of different parts of opinion-making businesses across our media, across our entertainment industries, etc., who also hate the Christian, European West, frankly. And it's come through various different lobbies, the cultural Marxists, so to speak, who always had a thing out for family and for church. Because, of course, those were, as you rightly pointed out, the peacemaking, the order-creating institutions. And they don't want that, because what they want is chaos. Because when there's chaos, then all of a sudden, boom, their government policies can implement some sort of different sort of...
And if you can't rely on a community horizontally, you end up being dependent on a political hierarchy.
Right, and that's exactly it. And when you believe in God, you say, well, this government seems immoral. This government seems like they're out to get us, you know? They want me to invite a whole bunch of people in who hate me, who hate my family, who hate my church. Like, this seems silly, you know? But all of a sudden, when I don't have any sort of identity as a child of God or as a European, well, then everyone can come in because it's a multi-culti, you know, dystopia, and these enrichment officers are just a price that we have to pay in order to achieve that noble goal of multiculturalism. I mean, when you start to see it that way, it becomes really, really clear that the war on Christmas is a war on Christianity, which is the cradle faith of Western civilization, i.e., all the European goodies that the world wants. And it's you know, a lot of people meme like, oh, the war on Christmas, like, who cares? It really does matter, folks. It really does matter. And circling back to that little girl, I mean, the fact that this next generation, all they're going to know are Christmas trees and nutcrackers, and I'm guessing within the next 10 years, rather, churches that are heavily armed. I mean, we have not passed the torch forward. And let me tell you, just based on demographics, the same torch is frankly going to come back and burn us.
Well, this is the thing that I wanted to mention as well, because we both have talked about this quite a bit. When it comes to self-restraint, I think, you know, there's this big problem online, and it happens in politics. It happens everywhere. This what's called virtue signaling, which is people who want to look good rather than do good, who want to gain the approval of shallow surface appearance of virtue rather than engage in the deep, often hard and unpopular work of actually being good. And one of the great weaknesses in the West at the moment is this pathological altruism. It is, in a sense, Christian charity gone amok, without the restraint of virtue or any kind of in-group preference. And I think, to me, the discipline to say, well, charity is good, and, you know, taking in people is good, and helping people out is good, but we cannot do it wantonly. We certainly cannot do it to people who fundamentally oppose our values. That is a form of cultural suicide. And I think having that kind of restraint, people are absolutely unrestrained in this, you know, we'll take all the refugees in the known universe. We'll not defend our own culture. We'll say everything's multicultural while continuing to defer to other cultures. And it is almost like licentiousness in the realm of ethics spins towards a significant vice.
Regrettably, what's happened within many church institutions and sort of surrounding bodies is a complete infestation of a Marxist agenda, of homosexual apologists, and even some child diddlers, frankly. And they have perverted the word of God. And the laity, regrettably, have not used this Protestant work ethic, this individual spirit, to go ahead and read the books themselves and correct our hierarchy where they have fallen short. We're constantly told, love your neighbor. What's the other part of that sentence? Love your neighbor like yourself. We are commanded to love ourselves. Suicide is not allowed within my faith, okay? And that is exactly what we're doing over right now. God does not say, you know, bring in a bunch of your enemies and, you know, let them live in your house and kill your family. Like, that's not part of our faith. That is such a strange, you know, perversion. Even, you know, the entitlement culture that is basically attracting all of these people over here. Tithing, like, you want to talk about God's tax? It's 10% flat. Figure out what you want to do with it, the government. Other than that, you're not entitled to my money. Like, I believe in Godonomics. 10% flat tax, that's it. They can figure out what to do with it. And if you can't afford your programs, time to nip them in the butt. And if that means the rest of the world doesn't want to come here as economic migrants, sorry, not sorry, they can build up their own countries and figure it out. But Christians today, under this almost occupied church, and I'm not talking about the Catholic Church right here, but there are many different kind of subsidiary factions of it, like, you know, our press, etc. Catholics today have bought into this notion that Jesus Christ was a divine Robin Hood that wants to just, you know, steal from the rich and give to the poor. And by the way, the poor includes, you know, all, you know, however many billions of the world's Muslims. No, like, that's not true. Actually, our people have been persecuted by Muslims how many times in history? It's why the Crusades had to be called, right? We've played this movie. We know how it ends. We have to fight back. But regrettably, again, I think even within the Catholic Church, which I think is really the only church that would be prepared, frankly, to take on the Islamification of the West, the infiltration of the West. Regrettably, I think our leadership is such now that while on theological ordinances we're still good, but on practical ordinances we've really run amok.
Well, and a lot of churches have become dependent on the state for huge amounts of income as part of these resettlement grants, right? So they take the refugees or the so-called refugees, often just economic opportunists or welfare state opportunists. They're taking hundreds of millions of dollars from the state, and it's very, very easy to get corrupted by that money. These are the 30 pieces of silver of the modern age.
I believe that churches should pay tax. I believe that so we can do whatever the heck we want. So we don't have to keep on taking orders, frankly, from the government. I think that, our Catholic school system, for instance, in my province, I would like to see it go private. Because instead what we have is basically the state telling us what we can and cannot teach our children. And it's too bad because, again, it's a problem of the gatekeepers. And we haven't remained vigilant around the gateposts, regrettably. And so all of this, there's so much work to be done. But the good news is I do believe that there is a charismatic renewal that's happening, and it's happening both in the church and it's near customers as well. You see some of these rates of the Gen Zs and the millennials. They're going to church more than their parents did. There is a hunger and thirst, and this is where I think the Hegelian dialectic perspective has a point, if you will, insofar as we've had this thesis of this, utilitarian and, also this like temporal appetite-driven way of life, and they're saying, well, now hold on a second, nothing works. I don't like the women that I'm looking at. They're dressed like, whatever. I don't like the men that they're looking at because they're acting like whatever. I want some sort of order in my life. I want a moral code. And well, here's one that's lasted for about 2,000 years. So let's see if this works. And so you're seeing, the pew numbers go up. And I have to say that even in the churches that I frequent, I'm seeing it used to be Q-tips, as I like to call them, white hair, white socks. It's not just the Q-tips anymore. It's a lot of young, beautiful people who are interested in politics, in philosophy, and in securing a future that they feel has not been secured for them. And they want a moral compass along the way. And so they're coming back to the faith. And I think some of them are there for intellectual and pragmatic reasons out of the gates, where I know that, being a cultural Christian would be in my interest. And then they get there and they inevitably will have some sort of a metaphysical experience, and they hang out and they stay. And it's been really beautiful. And even some of these, up and coming YouTube stars and the rest of it, you hear them talking about God. And even if it's just in a cultural way, it's been very, very edifying for me to watch.
And you said Q-tip, I hear cue ball, but I know what you're saying. So let's go with what you would like people to hear in Canada, in the West, in these troubling times of cultural conflict. What is it that you would most like people to hear? I mean, there are people, of course, who are already in your corner, so to speak, in your pew. What are the other people who are lost, who are maybe nervous, who are uncertain? What is it that you would like most to tell them this Christmas?
There is a demographic and a spiritual replacement that is taking place right now. And absolutely no one is going to fight for us except for us. We have to come to a point where we can admit the fact that while we are a society of individuals, we will have to band together as a church, as a body of Europeans, as Americans, as Canadians, and we have to fight for our way of life, because it has never in modern history been so under attack as it is right now, and it's situation critical. We have about 25 years in America, we have about 25 years in Canada, and just a little bit longer than that in Europe, to accomplish what we want. Otherwise, just based on demographics, more people are going to mosques than they're going to church. More people are naming their kids Muhammad than they are any one of the apostles' names. And more people are coming in, frankly, from the third world, from Africa, Middle East, and Asia than they are from European nations. So the numbers will turn against us within less than a generation. And so the time is now. We have to wake up, and we have to realize that it's self-preservation or it's suicide.
Yeah, demographics is one of these things that starts off like a snowflake and ends up as a tsunami of snow. And the sooner you can alter its course, the easier things are. Well,